Chapter 6. The owner of Yoshiwara had many ways of making money. One of them, and by far the most harmless, was to bet that no man, no matter how widely traveled, could guess the strange mix of races that had produced his face. So far he had won every single bet, raking in the money with hands of such cruel beauty that they would not have disgraced a Spanish Borgia ancestor. His nails, however, still carried an indelible bluish shimmer. On the other hand, the polite smile he wore on these profitable occasions clearly came from that graceful island world that, from the eastern edge of Asia, smiles gently and watchfully across at the power of America. He carried within him prominent traits that made him seem like a living representative of Great Britain and Ireland. He was as red-haired, as fond of joking, and as strong a drinker as if his name had been McFosh, as greedy and superstitious as a Scotsman, and in certain necessary situations capable of that highly cultivated indifference that forms one of the foundation stones of the British Empire. He spoke almost every living language as though his mother had taught him to pray in it, and his father to curse in it. His greed seemed to come from the Levant, his contentment from China. And above all these qualities, two quiet, observant eyes watched everything with German patience and perseverance. As for the rest, he was known, for reasons no one understood, as September. The visitors to Yoshiwara had seen September in every possible emotional state, from the dull, contented doze of a well-fed bushman to the wild dance ecstasy of a Ukrainian. But seeing his face frozen in absolute bewilderment was something reserved for Slim. On the morning after he had lost track of his young master, Slim struck the massive gong that demanded entrance to Yoshiwara. It was highly unusual for the normally obliging door to remain closed until the fourth gong. That it was opened by September himself, and with that particular expression on his face, only deepened the sense that some major disaster had only just been contained. Slim bowed. September stared at him. A brass-like mask seemed to drop over his features. But a quick glance at the taxi driver who had brought Slim tore the mask away again. "God, I wish that tin can of yours had blown up before you could bring that madman here yesterday evening," he said. "He drove away all my guests before they even thought of paying. The girls are huddled in the corners like wet rags, those who aren't having hysterics anyway. Unless I call the police, I might as well shut the place down. It doesn't look like that guy is going to come to his senses by this evening." "Who are you talking about, September?" Slim asked. September looked at him. At that moment, the smallest village in northern Siberia would have refused to claim such an idiot as one of its own. "If it's the man I've come looking for," Slim continued, "then I'll remove him from your hands in a much more pleasant and faster way than the police would." "And which man would that be, sir?" Slim hesitated. He cleared his throat slightly. "You know the white silk that is woven for only a very few people in Metropolis." In the long line of ancestors whose sediment had crystallized into September, there must have been a fur trader from Tarnopolis, for he now smiled out from the corners of his great-grandson's cunning eyes. "Come in, sir!" The owner of Yoshiwara invited him, with the true gentleness of Ceylon. Slim entered. September closed the door behind him. The moment the roaring morning noise of the great city no longer thundered up from the street, another roar became audible from inside the building, the roar of a human voice hotter than that of a wild beast, drunk with triumph. "Who is that?" Slim asked, instinctively lowering his own voice. "Him," September answered, managing to pack into that single syllable all the smooth, sharp vengefulness of Corsica. Slim's gaze wavered, but he said nothing. He followed September across soft, glossy straw mats and along walls of oiled paper set in narrow bamboo frames. Behind one of these walls, the monotonous, hopeless, heartbreaking weeping of a woman could be heard, like long days of rain enveloping the summit of Mount Fuji. "That's Yuki," September muttered, casting a fierce glance at the paper prison of that pitiful sobbing. "She's been crying since midnight, as if she wanted to create a whole new salt sea. By this evening she'll have a swollen potato instead of a nose. And who pays for it? I do." "Why is the little snowflake crying?" Slim asked, half absent-mindedly. because the roaring voice coming from the depths of the house had completely captured his attention. "Oh, she's not the only one," September replied with the tolerant air of a man who runs a thriving harbor tavern in Shanghai. "Bin is at least calm. Plum Blossom has been pacing like a young puma, and Miss Rainbow smashed the sake bowl against the mirror and is trying to cut her arteries with the shards, all because of that white silk boy." The troubled look on Slim's face deepened. He shook his head. "How did he manage to get such a hold over them?" he said. "It wasn't really a question." September shrugged. "Maohee," he said in a sing-song voice, as if beginning one of those Greenland fairy tales that are valued more the faster they put you to sleep. "What is Maohee?" Slim asked irritably. September pulled his head down between his shoulders. The Irish and British blood in his veins seemed to be fighting violently, but the impenetrable Japanese smile covered it before it could become dangerous. "You don't know what Maohee is. Not a soul in the great metropolis knows. No, nobody. But here in Yoshiwara, everyone knows." "I want to know too, September," said Slim. Generations of Roman servants bowed inside September as he replied, "Very humbly, sir." But the wink of his heavy drinking, lying grandfathers in Copenhagen was not so easily defeated. "Maohee, that is. Isn't it strange that of all the 10,000 guests who have been here in Yoshiwara and experienced exactly what Maohee means, none of them remember anything about it once they leave? Don't walk so fast, sir. The yelling gentleman down there won't run away, and if I'm going to explain what Maohee means— Drugs, I suppose, September? My dear sir, a lion is also a cat. Maohee is a drug, but what is a cat next to a lion? Maohee comes from the other side of the earth. It is the divine, the only thing, because it is the only thing that lets us feel the intoxication of others." "The intoxication of others?" Slim repeated, stopping. September smiled the smile of Hote, the god of happiness, who loves little children. He placed the Borgia hand, with its suspiciously blue shimmering nails, on Slim's arm. "The intoxication of others, sir, do you know what that means? Not of one other person, no, of the multitude that rolls itself into a single mass. The gathered intoxication of the crowd gives Maohee its power." "Does Maohee have many friends, September?" The owner of Yoshiwara grinned with apocalyptic glee. "Sir, in this house there is a round room. You shall see it. It has no equal. It is built like a winding seashell, like a giant shell in whose spirals the surf of 7 oceans thunders. In those spirals people crouch so densely packed that their faces seem to become one single face. No one knows the others, yet they are all friends. They all burn with fever. They are all pale with anticipation. They have all clasped hands. The trembling of those at the very bottom of the shell travels through every winding, all the way up to those at the gleaming top, who send their own trembling back down." September paused for breath. Sweat stood like a fine string of beads on his forehead. An international smile of madness parted his chattering lips. "Go on, September," said Slim. "On?" Suddenly the rim of the shell begins to turn, gently, ah, so gently, to music that would make a 10-time murderer weep and his judges pardon him on the scaffold, to music that makes deadly enemies kiss, beggars feel like kings, and the hungry forget their hunger. To such music the shell revolves around its stationary heart, until it seems to lift off the ground and spin freely in the air. The people scream, not loudly, no, they scream like birds bathing in the sea. Their twisted hands clench into fists. Their bodies rock in one single rhythm. Then comes the first stammer, Maohee. The stammer grows into waves, into a flood. The revolving shell roars, Maohee. Maohee. It is as if a little flame must rest on everyone's hair parting, like St. Elmo's fire. Maohee. Maohee. They call upon their god. They call upon the one whom the finger of the god will touch today. No one knows where he will come from. But he is there. They know he is among them. He must step forward. He must, for they are calling him Maohee. Maohee. And suddenly, The Borgia hand flew up and hung in the air like a brown claw. And suddenly a man stands in the middle of the shell, in the gleaming circle, on the milk-white disk. But it is no ordinary man. He is the living embodiment of the intoxication of them all. He is not conscious of himself. A slight froth stands on his lips. His eyes are wide and bursting, yet like rushing meteors leaving trails of fire across the sky. He stands and lives their intoxication. He becomes what their intoxication is. From the thousands of eyes anchored in his soul, the power of their collective ecstasy flows into him. There is no delight in God's creation that does not reveal itself through him. What he says becomes visible. What he hears becomes audible to all. What he feels, power, desire, madness, is felt by everyone. On that shimmering disk, to indescribable music, one man in ecstasy lives the thousandfold ecstasy of the others. September stopped and smiled at Slim. That, sir, is Maohee. It must be an incredibly powerful drug, said Slim, his throat dry, to make the owner of Yoshiwara sing such a hymn. Do you think the yelling man down there would join in that psalm of praise? Ask him yourself, sir, said September. He opened the door and let Slim enter. Just past the threshold, Slim stopped, because at first he saw nothing. A gloom deeper than total darkness filled a room whose dimensions he could not guess. The floor sloped gently beneath his feet. Where it ended, there seemed to be only empty darkness. Spiral walls billowed outward to both sides. That was all he could see. But from the empty depths ahead came a white shimmer, faint as light from a snowfield. Floating on that shimmer was a voice, that of a murderer and of one being murdered. Light, September! Slim said, swallowing hard. An unbearable thirst burned in his throat. The room slowly brightened, as if the light came unwillingly. Slim realized he was standing in one of the windings of the enormous shell-shaped room. He stood between the heights and the depths, separated by a low railing from the emptiness below, where the snow-like light, the murderer's voice, and the voice of the victim originated. He stepped to the railing and leaned far over it. Below lay a milk-white disk, lit from beneath and glowing. At its edge, like a dark, restless pattern on a plate rim, women in gorgeous attire crouched and knelt as though drunk. Some had pressed their foreheads to the ground, hands clutched in their ebony hair. Some huddled together, head pressed ahead, symbols of fear. Some swayed rhythmically, calling on gods. Some wept. Some seemed already dead. Yet all of them seemed to be servants of the man on the glowing disk. The man wore the white silk woven for only a few in Metropolis. He wore the soft shoes in which the beloved sons of powerful fathers seemed to caress the earth. But the silk hung in tatters from his body, and the shoes looked as though the feet inside them were bleeding. Is that the man you are looking for, sir? Asked the Levantine part of September, leaning confidently towards Slim's ear. Slim did not answer. He was staring at the man. At least, September continued, it is the young man who came here yesterday in the same car that brought you today. And damn him for it! He has turned my beautiful revolving shell into the forecourt of hell. He has been roasting souls. I have seen people on Maohee imagine themselves kings, gods, fire, and storm, and force others to feel the same. I have seen men in the ecstasy of desire pull women diving from the highest parts of the shell, swooping down like seagulls with open arms, landing unharmed at their feet, while others fell to their deaths. But that man, there was no god, no storm, no fire. His drunkenness inspired no desire. It seems he came up from hell and is roaring in the intoxication of damnation. He did not understand that the ecstasy of the damned is also damnation. The fool! The prayer he is praying will not save him. He believes he is a machine and is praying to himself. He has forced the others to pray to him. He has crushed them. He has ground them to powder. Many will drag themselves through Metropolis today wondering why their bodies feel broken. Be quiet, September! Slim said hoarsely. His hand flew to his throat, which felt like glowing cork, like smoldering charcoal. September fell silent and shrugged. Words continued to bubble up from the depths like lava. He turned to leave but stopped when Georgie's voice followed him weakly. The city, all the lights, more than enough money. It is written, "Forgive us our trespasses, lead us not into temptation." His voice faded. His head fell to one side. He breathed as though his soul was weeping, since his eyes could no longer do so. The doctor cleared his throat cautiously. Slim lifted his head as if someone had called him, then lowered it again. "I'll come back later," he said softly. "Keep him under your care." Georgie was asleep. Slim left the room, followed by the policeman. "What do you want?" Slim asked, looking at him distractedly. "The report, sir." "What report?" "I was supposed to take down a report, sir." Slim looked at the policeman very attentively, almost thoughtfully. He raised his hand and rubbed it across his forehead. "A mistake," he said. "That was a mistake." The policeman saluted and left, slightly puzzled, because he knew Slim. Slim remained standing in the same spot. Again and again he rubbed his forehead with the same helpless gesture. Then he shook his head, stepped into the car, and said, "90th block."